The content of this podcast has not been evaluated by Health Canada or the FDA. It is educational in nature and should not be taken as medical advice. Always consult a qualified medical professional to see if a diet, lifestyle change, or supplement is right for you. Any supplements mentioned are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. Please note that the opinions of the guests or hosts are their own and may not reflect those of Advanced Orthomolecular Research Incorporated. Welcome to Supplementing Health, a podcast presented by Advanced Orthomolecular Research. We are all about applying evidence-based and effective dietary, lifestyle, and natural health product strategies for your optimal health. In each episode, we will feature very engaging clinicians and experts from the world of functional and naturopathic medicine to help achieve our mission to empower people to live their best lives naturally. Start protecting your heart today with AOR's Met-Syn 568R or red yeast rice for those in Canada. It has been clinically shown to promote healthy cholesterol levels and promotes healthy cardiovascular function without the undesirable effects of monocolin K. Learn more at aor.ca or aor.us. Welcome to Supplementing Health, where we explore the health and wellness space with industry experts touching on and applying evidence-based natural health strategies for your optimal health. Today, I have the honor of Dr. Joel Kahn joining me to discuss the reversal of cardiovascular disease through lifestyle habits and natural treatments. Dr. Kahn has practiced traditional cardiology since 1983, and through his own commitment to plant-based vegan diet, he began to delve into non-conventional diagnostic tools, prevention tactics, and nutrition-based recovery protocols. Welcome, Dr. Kahn. Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you so much. I'm excited.
Okay, so cardiovascular disease is a name for a group of disorders of heart and blood vessels. Would you share some of what the conditions and disorders are that fall into this overarching grouping?
Well, that's actually a very intelligent comment, so I compliment you, because we hear over and over, and we should hear over and over, number one cause of death in 2020 in the United States, number one cause of death in Western countries around the world, cardiovascular diseases. Some of those are heart attacks. That's sometimes called a subset, coronary heart disease. Coronary usually refers to arteries around the heart. So clogged arteries causing chest pain, causing heart attacks, that can cause death, that need bypass, need stents. That's a big piece, and you hear about that all the time. You can have a heart attack that weakens the heart and leaves somebody with congestive heart failure. There's other reasons to have congestive heart failure. Those are cardiovascular diseases affecting many people and really, really impacting people's lives negatively. You can have rhythm problems of the heart, skippy beats, fast beats, slow beats, pacemakers. Those are all cardiovascular disease. But we also include kind of brain vessels, so strokes, fall in cardiovascular disease, leg circulation leading to amputation. So it's really anything blood vessel related that impacts health. And when you lump all that together, it's filling hospitals, filling in coronary care units, robbing people of lifespan, robbing people of quality of life. I mean, and we can prevent most of it.
Awesome. So I understand that you yourself follow a vegan diet. How long have you done this, and what are the differences you've noticed during this time?
Yeah, I'm an OG, original gangsta vegan, because I just turned 62, and I started a vegan diet at age 18 at University of Michigan in the dormitory. My first week of undergrad, hated everything but the salad bar. It wasn't really a picky thing. It was based on keeping kosher dietary laws. So salad bar worked, and I felt so good. And my girlfriend, who's my wife of 40 years, after a week, we both felt so good. We never ate animal products again, and we didn't have a name for it. We weren't vegan. We were just people. But, you know, as the movement grew and as I became a doctor and studied the science, whole food, plant-based is a little more medical name for it all. But yeah, good stuff.
And so it's well known that diet plays a major role in cardiovascular disease and reducing that risk. Researchers have found plant-based diets are best for reducing the risk of CVD. So would you walk me through some of the supporting research and the findings that are most promising in your opinion?
Sure. I mean, going way back, because I am an OG when it comes to the research on this too. Going back to the 60s and the 70s, because there had been a spike in heart attacks after World War II in the 50s, like President Eisenhower. A lot of funding started going to why do people like President Eisenhower almost die of heart attacks? Fortunately, he ended up living for about 14 more years, but he had a serious heart attack. And a lot of it focused on diet. We knew smoking was a factor, of course, and thank God most Americans have quit smoking, and other Western countries, there's still too many that do smoke, and young kids. But the diet thing focused more and more on fats and, to be sophisticated, saturated fats. Foods rich in saturated fats were associated with a higher risk of heart attack and early death. That's the eggs, that's the bacon, that's the cheese, that's the lard, that's the croissant, that's the full fat dairy, that's the red meat, white meat, chicken, turkey. No, you eat a little bit of that stuff. You're not eating that much saturated fat, but chicken is like the holy grail in the United States in the last 20, 30 years. Chicken's healthy chicken. Chicken's full of fat, chemicals, salt, and other, ill-chosen choices for your health. And then we found out, so what prevents heart disease? And every study around the world will suggest more fruits, more vegetables, more whole grains, more legumes, the beans, the peas, the lentils, for avoiding heart disease, for reducing your risk of type 2 diabetes and obesity, for improving your brain health long term, and probably for longevity. The study of people that live to super long age, they eat very, very plant-rich diets. And now there are other fats, avocados, walnuts, seeds, nuts, maybe extra virgin olive oil, but they're low in saturated fat. I mean, the difference between butter and extra virgin olive oil has been studied in many studies, and they're not the same fats. They don't have the same impact. So it's really the enemy, and every medical society around the world agrees, although there are voices out there that would argue opposite, but they are the minority, and they don't have the science to back them, is cut back on your saturated fat, which is typically to cut back on animal foods, with the exception of coconut oil and palm oil. They are two super, super high saturated fat food options, and it's best to avoid them, even though the science isn't completely abundant to declare them off our menu, but they should be off our menu.
So one of the negatives that we hear a lot about vegetarian or vegan diets is that it can lead to vitamin B12 deficiencies,
Right.
if not very carefully planned and monitored.
Absolutely right. You're absolutely right. The interesting thing, though, is and I'm not here to defend anything, and I don't criticize people that aren't vegan. I just want them to eat a lot of salads and apples and, the whole 9 yards. But, vegan science has identified, because in nature and in history, there have been many plant-forward societies. I mean, in Okinawa, traditionally, where they had amazing longevity in the 1930s, 40s, 50s, in that Japanese island, they were eating far fewer than 10% of calories from animal foods. So we have to ask legitimately the question. I mean, I'm 44 years into this. You can, punch me, you can, squeeze me and see, is he still alive and is he in good health? And thank goodness I am, and I'm on no medications. And at 62, I got enough energy, to take on the world. But with all that said and done, it's a legitimate science question. So we've actually know that there are a number of nutrients, even with a well-selected plant-based diet, that can be a little deficient, like B12, like vitamin D, like iodine, like vitamin K2, and we have the science. So you can just plan to supplement them or to measure them and then supplement them if you want to. Now, the reality is that most diets in the United States in the last 50 years are deficient in nutrients. That is, data from the 1930s that 85% of the population was deficient in magnesium. That's nuts and seeds and greens and leafies. 80% of the population in certain urban settings are deficient in vitamin D. We talk about it in the plant-based community. We test for it and we correct it. Honestly, that same approach should be taken by people of other diets too. They should ask, hey, can you check my vitamin D level, my zinc level, my iodine level, my magnesium level, my selenium level? These are actually pretty simple standard blood tests that are available. And if you're doing an odd diet, even if you're doing just a quote unquote average American diet, I still would check because the odds are you're deficient. Or take inexpensive broad spectrum multimineral multivitamin 3-4 times a week. It'll cover the bases.
So phytocannabinoids are another nutrient that are abundant in a plant-based diet, especially in foods like grapes and broccoli and cabbage and carrots, etc. And they've been shown to have many benefits to stimulate neuroplasticity and facilitate neurological cell growth. But are there also benefits from phytocannabinoids for cardiovascular system?
I don't think anybody's ever asked that question better than you. Good for you. Wow. And of course, phytocannabinoids, the fact that people have been using cannabis for centuries. Scientists in the 1960s identified THC and CBD. And then in the 70s, we got receptors all through our body for those chemicals. I mean, what the heck is going on? And then we learned that the body makes endocannabinoids. We make our own chemicals like anandamide that actually can interact with a receptor on blood vessels, to answer your question, on cardiac tissue, and throughout the body. In fact, some people say there's more receptors for cannabinoids in our body than any other receptor system in the body, like insulin receptors or vitamin D receptors. Fascinating. And yes, eating plants, whether the cardiovascular benefits of eating plant-strong diets or plant-only diets is directly due to the endocannabinoid system activation, that's actually not known. But there's also known not to be any harm. And when you take broccoli, I mean, you could spend 5 hours talking about all the different pathways biochemically, the fiber, the water, the vitamins, the nutrients. The fact that broccoli properly cooked leads to something called sulforaphane, which is a very potent activator of antioxidants. But you throw in that it might activate some receptors in the ECS, the endocannabinoid system, is just another area of future research. I don't think we can say right now it's the biggest reason to eat broccoli. Not too many people, put on Santana when they're eating broccoli because it gives them a little bit of a mellow feeling. It's not much of a stimulant of the endocannabinoid system. Try cooking broccoli with Santana on next time. It might give you a little different response.
Might boost you up a bit.
For sure. Oh, yeah, como broccoli.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely gonna have to try that. What are some of the laboratory tests that you utilize in practice to establish a patient's baseline heart health and monitor their progress towards reduced risk?
Yeah, good question. Well, number one, people can monitor it at home to some degree. You need a home scale, and you definitely need a home blood pressure cuff. It is really an amateur. If your goal in life is to live long and healthy, I'm being very bold, but you're an amateur if you don't have a home blood pressure cuff and use it regularly. I think it's the biggest deficit in kind of self-monitoring of our health is not doing that, and not enough people talking about it and telling people to do it. So get a home blood pressure cuff, get a scale. In the office, of course, I'm going to weigh you. I'm going to probably measure your waistline because a big old belly is not associated with good cardiovascular health. And I'm going to take your blood pressure 3-4 times because people get white coat hypertension even when I don't wear a white coat in the office. So I'm going to measure your blood pressure. A physical exam beyond that is spotty and not all that helpful. I'll tell you one, everybody listening, there is something on the earlobe called a diagonal earlobe crease. It's sometimes abbreviated DELC. And if you were to go to your favorite search engine, DuckDuckGo or something, and look in diagonal earlobe crease, you'll see pictures of people like Steven Spielberg that have this deep crease they didn't have when they were a kid. And it is a proven clue, odd as this is, to potentially having clogged heart arteries. So I am sort of an earlobe connoisseur, and I really, really sometimes have to bite my lip not to go up to somebody at a restaurant or the airport and say, you don't know me, and this is odd, but you might have heart disease because I know your earlobes suggest they do. It's actually in the science literature. Then we got to go beyond that. We got to do lab work. We got to know your cholesterol, your blood sugar, your vitamin D, your inflammation, high sensitivity, C-reactive protein. I am a big fan of testing something called lipoprotein little a, LIPO protein, and then small letter a. It's a genetic cholesterol that is inherited by 20 to 25% of people, and it can destroy your arteries and your heart valves over life because you have it since you're a child. And we aren't yet in a medical system where yet every internist, family doc, gynecologist, you only got to check it once. Either you inherited it or you didn't. So we're going to do, advanced cholesterol, inflammation, vitamin levels, B12, vitamin D. Omega-3 is a really easy and important vitamin level to check. Many people, it doesn't matter if they're on a meat diet, fish diet, plant diet, are low in omega-3. And for brain health and cardiovascular health, it's important. And then lastly, just to be succinct, there is a screening test for heart disease. Mr. Smith, I want you to go get a colonoscopy. You're 45 years old. Doctor, I don't have any problem. Well, you still should find out if you're at risk for colorectal cancer. And 45 is the new recommended guideline that just was introduced recently. Or Mrs. Jones, you need a mammogram, but I don't have any problem with my breast. Just do it. We want to do early detection. Well, why aren't we saying anything about the heart is a very good question, because since 1990, you can now, I'm talking 2021, you can spend $75, maybe $99 at your local hospital, and you can get a CT scan of your heart that involves no injection, no radiation injected in your body. It is a CT scan, so there's some radiation associated with it. It's painless. It takes about 10 seconds. It's called a coronary artery calcium CT scan. It looks at the heart arteries, and it also does look at heart valves and such for premature calcification. Bones and teeth calcified, great. You do not want your heart arteries calcified. It's a sign of aging. It's a sign of plaque. It's a sign that it's time to get to a preventive cardiologist and get a deep dive and make some changes. Anyway, so that is kind of my early fix. Good history, good physical, lab work, a little more than the average internist, and a $99 or $75 heart CT. You're either going to come out in a really great bucket, youthful arteries, or you're going to come out a little bit disturbed and make some changes to prevent the next 20 years being tragic, perhaps.
I love that. Have you ever utilized non-conventional testing in your practice, such as the pulse test or LPP testing?
Everything. I'm like a freak on wearables, and I'm a freak on all those things. The max wave pulse, which measures pulse wave velocity. It's of some value, but 400 years ago, a scientist in England, a physician, said you're as old as your arteries. And 30 years ago, a very prominent blood vessel specialist in Europe said, if you want to predict the presence of artery disease, look at arteries. So I find all these other things nowhere near as helpful as the CT scan, because it's directly looking at arteries, painless, inexpensive, available at hospitals all over the United States. It just, unfortunately, docs are not recommending as a routine. Mr. Jones, Mrs. Smith, Bob, Susan, whatever the name you want to put in there. You're 45, you're 50, your dad had a bypass at age 72, bada boom, bada bing, go spend 99 bucks. It's a big problem, but conversations like this bring it up. I wrote a book 5 years ago, got republished 2 years ago. It's called Dead Execs Don't Get Bonuses. And it's on Amazon, it's inexpensive. It's step by step. The blood work I would recommend, the CT scan I would recommend, and the response you make to it if it's not perfectly normal.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll definitely have to check that out. So when it comes to weight management, which is a dominant risk factor for CVD, what are your thoughts around following a BMI calculation?
Yeah, it's okay. We all know you can have that athlete that's very muscular, and the BMI is high, but they obviously have a low body fat, that is the fallback. But for most of us, the BMI being 25 to 30, being overweight, over 30 obese, over 40, morbidly obese, is still a useful way to track and monitor it. It's built in so many monitoring watches. I have a scale at home that when I step on it, because it already knew my height, because I have an app for the scale, it tells me my BMI every time I step on it. It can be a bit motivating, unless you are an NFL football player or a body lifter, where there are some drawbacks. So Now, it's better than nothing. There's a lot of data about your waist or hip to waist. It's better to have a small waist and bigger hips than a big waistline. That may be even more accurate than the BMI. You can go get a DEXA scan and find out your percent body fat, might be more accurate. Well, when you talk about reality, most doctors' electronic medical records have the BMI built in, and it just pops up, and it's just at least something to move the conversation forward.
Awesome. So lifestyle changes, though, they can take time to have the desired effect that people are looking for. So what other protocols and treatments do you utilize in practice to help with patients' compliance so that they start to realize the benefits in a timely manner and kind of feel like they're making a progress?
Well, people that are in my practice, I'm in suburban Detroit, although I do counseling to patients all over the world. I mean, they're getting weekly emails and YouTubes, that I personally create and write for them to keep them on track. And they're going to come back and get repeat labs. And, we're going to look for early wins, maybe the omega-3 level, maybe the vitamin D level, maybe the inflammation level, maybe the cholesterol particles have improved. Of course, we want people to feel better. And if you can get people sleeping better, they're going to feel better. And, sleep deficits are a huge problem. And that's, even though it's a cardiac practice, I spend a tremendous amount of time doing home sleep studies, using natural products for sleep aids, from full spectrum hemp CBDs to magnesiums to glycine to herbal preps for people that don't like melatonin, perhaps. I have some herbal plant-based melatonin. So, we go on and on, get people sleeping. That's a quick win. Weight loss is tricky. For some people, I do some fasting protocols and short 5-day fast based on scientific literature. And people feel real better and they drop 8-10 pounds. But there are people that, they're just stonewalled, and it's not easy to get everybody to start peeling off some pounds. But of course, a lot of people, that's their primary goal. So we'll keep working on that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a great conversation, and there's so much more we could cover, but unfortunately time won't allow. So for our listeners that do want more of your wisdom, you have your website, drjoelkahn.com, and you also have your own podcast, correct?
I do. I put out kind of like we had what we just covered in 20 to 25 minutes could literally save lives, one after another after another. And in other instances could just decrease anxiety. People are fearful of their heart. They don't know that they're $75 away from a CT scan that may actually give them good news. So it's not all Debbie Downer necessarily. Well, I guess now we have to call it Karen talk in the last year and a half of conversation in the world. I don't particularly like that term because my darling wife is Karen. But anyways, it's that simple. So I have a 20-minute podcast once a week called Heart Doc VIP. Happens to be on COVID this week. Last week it was on, I think it was on saturated fat last week, actually. Quick, short topics to take away and lead people to have a little healthier choice during the week.
Fantastic. Well, hopefully everyone checks that out. And I really appreciate you taking the time to chat with me today.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Supplementing Health. For more information about our guests, past shows, and future topics, please visit aor.ca/podcast or aor.us/podcast. Do you have a topic you want us to cover? We invite you to engage with us on social media to request a future topic or email us at marketing@aor.ca.